Ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to have two consecutive quarters of negative growth, which is what a recession is. So the last quarter was 2.1% growth. Quarter prior to that was 3.1% growth. So, and both quarters beat GDP estimates. That being said, we still have record low unemployment. We still have a lot more manufacturing growth than under President Obama. The job growth, even with revised numbers of 500,000 jobs revised, is still 4.2 million in 2 years, 2017, 2018. That's actually on the low end because I'm not even counting 2019. But 4.2 million in 2 years compared to 8.7 or so million in 8 years under President Obama. I can get the actual, if you look at the job growth numbers, you can see, well, in terms of manufacturing up by, in Trump's first 30 months, manufacturing up by 314,000 jobs over President Obama. So that's a Forbes article. That's a Forbes article, July 10th, 2019, up by 314,000 jobs. So he promised that, but let's see, and he delivered on that. 4.2 million. Okay, so here's another article, why wages are finally rising 10 years after the recession. But where is that? I'm trying to find 4.2 million jobs. Oh, compared to 8 years, 8.9 million. Okay, so he is roughly half of President Obama's job creation in just 2 years, compared to 8 years where it was 8.9 million jobs created. Okay, that is pretty good. They're hoping and praying for a recession, but what's taking place is that President Trump is actually winning his trade battle with China. And the reason he's winning is because we are not feeling the effects in the same manner as China. Their economy is slowing down. And the reason that I'm trying to find this article, my God, where is the Lord? All right, I'll find the link to it. But it's even with the revised estimates, it's 4.2 million jobs created. Okay, 4.2 million jobs created in 2 years with the estimates. Oh, okay, here it is, the balance. February 19th, 2019, 12 presidents, job creation by number and percent. So before we get into the trade deficit with China, which is what President Trump has the courage to address, let's just look at President Obama created 8.9 million jobs in 8 years. Okay, President Trump created 4.7 million jobs in his first 2 years. Okay, and even if you want to, there was an estimate that revised it by 500,000 jobs. So even if you want to say, well, it was revised downwards. Okay, that's still 4.2 million jobs in his first 2 years. That's not even counting 2019. Do the math. He's on pace to absolutely crush President Obama's job numbers of 8.9 million in 8 years, with 4.2 million in 2 years. But this is the balance. Which presidents created the most jobs? 12 presidents' job creation by numbers and percent. Updated February 19th, 2019. If you asked Paul Krugman, if you asked other people prior to President Trump's inauguration, they would say this is impossible. The tariffs, the trade deficit would harm the economy. We now have 4.2 million jobs created, and that's with, I'm using the revision of 500,000 jobs subtracted from that. but 4.2 million jobs in 2 years, far on pace to crush President Obama's job numbers. We had in the first quarter 3.1% GDP growth. The second quarter we have 2.1% GDP growth. The best thing that the Democrats can say is, well, there's going to be a slowdown. Well, okay, why are you so happy? It's your only chance is like the Bill Maher syndrome. The only chance they have is for a recession. They're not going to get a recession. Okay, they're not going to get a recession because you have manufacturing jobs. There's not a bubble that's fostering this economic growth. The economic growth is partially due to a growth in manufacturing jobs, but also people have more money to spend because of the tax cuts. They've revved up the economy. There are other reasons as well. If you look at the stock market, there's not a tech bubble. There's not a real estate bubble in terms of why the economy is growing. There's record low unemployment. These are all good things. But why the U.S.-China trade deficit is so huge. Here's all the stuff America imports. So we have currently a trade deficit. Where is the trade deficit? Where is this thing? Okay, of 400. Oh, Lord. U.S.-China trade deficit. Okay. We have a deficit of $419 billion. The U.S. Trade deficit with China was $419 billion in 2018. Okay? That is not that type of reality is not sustainable going forward. They're the biggest market in the world, and the United States and China are the two biggest economies in the world. President Trump is the only president with the courage to actually address this. No other president, whether it's Bush or Obama, or let's say it was an establishment Republican or Clinton who won in 2016, they would never address this. Why is it important? It's important for the following reasons. If you look, addressing China's trade practices, Business Roundtable, China engages in unfair trade and investment practices, preventing U.S. companies from competing on a level playing field and hurting U.S. workers. Business Roundtable urges the administration to negotiate solutions to these longstanding issues with China and de-escalate economic tensions and remove... Okay, so the administration should also continue to work with allies to strengthen and sustain reforms in China to provide more stability for the American economy and to help American business compete fairly. What incentive does China have to compete fairly if there's such a tremendous trade imbalance? And if the U.S. never addresses this trade imbalance, they have no incentive. They have no incentive. So, currency manipulation. This isn't the problem. Okay, so currency manipulation, tariffs and taxes. They engage in tariffs. They dump unfair trade practices in terms of dumping steel. There's intellectual property issues. Let's just look at what the White House, there's a whole bunch of articles on this. Industry Week 2016. This is when President Obama was in office. This is going to be it's time to stand up to China. Why and how the U.S. must confront China on unfair trade practices. Do you remember when China was accepted into the World Trade Organization in 2001? Presidents Clinton and Bush, as well as many other public policy leaders, predicted that it would improve the U.S.-China trade balance. Okay. The U.S. deficit with China has ballooned to from $83 billion to $366 million, and now it's even more, like I just read, in 2015. China is... Okay, so... The most recent example is the steel industry. According to American Steel and Iron Institute, American steel mills have had to lay off 13,500 employees because China has been dumping steel in the U.S. The Chinese steel companies can sell steel at below market prices because they are state-owned and by definition are subsidized by the government. Further, a recent lawsuit by United States Steel Corp charges China with price fixing. Steeling companies trade secrets and shipping steel to the U.S. through other countries so buyers don't know the country origin. China is not a market economy, much less it is an Industry Week article during President Obama's administration, much less a free market economy. Still, the U.S. continues to treat China as a free market economy, with the hope that it still somehow encourages them to begin playing by the same rules governing the rest of the world. But alas, it's not happening. Here's a short list of some of China's strategies. Currency manipulation. China manipulates its currency to keep the U.S. dollar value high, so the Chinese companies have 30% to 40% cost advantage. This undervaluation is illegal and should be considered a direct export subsidy. Yet the Commerce Department has refused to treat currency undervaluation as actionable under the law. Well, of course, you're not supposed to do that. State-owned enterprises. China owns and subsidizes many companies, as in the steel industry, for example. Through subsidized companies, China can target a market with low-cost products, capture market share, and drive competitors out of business. Technology theft. China knows that technology and innovation is what can make them the number one manufacturer in the world, and they are prepared to get it in any way they can. They have been accused of using espionage, counterfeiting, and buying American technology companies as standard strategies. Well, the last one, I'm not sure if that's not illegal. But according to U.S.-China Economic Panel, quote, China's government conducts and sponsors a massive cyber espionage operation aimed at stealing trade secrets and intelligence from U.S. corporations and government. This includes blocking U.S. company websites, revoking business licenses, and censoring the internet. Technology transfer. Okay, so as a condition of accessing Chinese markets, China requires U.S. companies that build plants in China to create joint ventures with local companies and share with them their latest technologies. So it's pretty, research and development facilities. China requires foreign companies with plants in China to set up R&D facilities in China. As a result, foreign companies have built more than 1,000 R&D labs in China. So why is President Trump winning? Because he's actually imposing tariffs. He's actually doing things to prevent this perpetual unfairness or trade imbalance or these unfair trade practices. He's addressing them. It's something that no other president had the courage to do. It's something that no other president. Look, Democrats don't have a long-term, and establishment Republicans don't have a long-term strategy. If a country as large and if an economy and a market as large and with the potential of China isn't forced to play fair now, they'll have even more leverage in the future. So it's a good thing that when people say, "Oh my God, the tariffs, oh my God," they're just complaining and they're not looking at the long term. They're not looking at the long term benefits for the United States of America. If we don't address this now, the future looks better from an economic perspective for China. The long-term economic prospects look better for China than it does for us. We're not assured at being number one in terms of the economy in the next 100, 200 years, especially if Democrats get their way and they keep destroying countries like Libya. And Clinton engages in neoconservative foreign policy that Bill Kristol and Robert Kagan and Max Boot agree. Why do you think Bill Kristol, Robert Kagan, and Max Boot are voting for Clinton? Okay, this is hilarious because you have the biggest justice warriors / people who use the word empire all the time, and they're going to vote for Clinton when she runs again. She's running again, okay, and she would never have, and she won't engage in this kind of hard-hitting, this President Trump's negotiation style. She's not going to. Let's say she were to win, which she's not. Clinton's not going to win. She's going to run again. She's going to become Democratic nominee. It'll be Clinton versus Trump in 2020. and Trump will win again. But one of the reasons he's going to win is because there will be enough people of all different backgrounds, of all different ethnicities. There will be more Asian Americans, more African Americans, more Jewish voters, more Latinos, more of every ethnicity to vote for Trump in 2020 because they realize that the media is trying to paint a narrative, trying to create a reality that doesn't exist. As China economy slows, over-reliant world exporters start to hurt. China's regions hit by infrastructure spending downturn. This is the Washington Post. G7 leaders hope for productive and quiet summit. Amid worries, Trump will disrupt the gathering. I hope he disrupts the gathering. I hope he takes the table and just throws it all over the representatives. I hope he does that. That's another reason Trump will win re-election and also his trade battle with China, because it's long overdue. Okay, the future is more advantageous. The future looks better for China than it does for us. So we have to address all the different unfair trade practices and the deficit with China now, as opposed to later. They'll have less incentive. They'll be much stronger, and they'll have greater leverage, much greater leverage. Okay? And so that's important. U.S. trade with it, why is it so high? Okay, so, and the trade deficit has grown, has continued to grow, okay? There's no stopping it. What President Trump is also saying is, look, there's Vietnam, there's Thailand, there's other countries that U.S. companies can go to if, for example, you don't stop these unfair trade practices. But China's economy is being harmed more than our economy by Trump's negotiation tactics, by tariffs, and by his negotiations. So, let's see. So Trump's China trade war spirals as 2020 looms. CNN. Oh my God, it spirals. Well, then who is going to address this? Who is going to address this? Who is going to tell China, look, there's other countries in Asia or in the world that American companies can go to if you continue to engage in these trade practices? And then, okay, here we go. Trump asserts he can force U.S. companies to leave China. Okay, he can't. He probably can't. But this is all part of this is all part of his negotiation tactics. Here are the reasons for Trump's economic battle with China. Okay, so $419 billion trade deficit. I mentioned the things that they do. And I don't blame China for doing what it does, for dumping steel or for manipulating currency. I don't blame, if they can get away with it, why not? I don't blame them for what they're doing. They're doing what they can get away with, like any other country in their position, like we would, if we could get away with those things. But at a certain point, you have to, as a country, you have to say, well, right now is the time. Can't wait for the future because the trade deficit keeps increasing. Give me your thoughts below. Our economy is fine, especially considering the fact that he's engaging in these tariffs. And there is a trade battle with China. And it's something that no other president would even think of doing at this point. Going into 2020, do you know how many you-know-whats Trump gives regarding what the media or anyone else thinks of him? He's going into 2020 with a trade battle with China. Okay, that's a pretty good understanding of the long-term prospects of both countries. He knows that if we don't address all of this now, we'll never be able to address it in the future. Establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans, they don't care. They wouldn't care on all of these issues, whether it's immigration or trade. People don't like Trump because he actually stands for a long-term solution to things. Now, the solution is not the answers are not what establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans want. They want the status quo, and they want slow and gradual change, and they just really don't. Even American farmers who don't benefit in the short term necessarily, they know long term the tariffs benefit them. Definitely the steel industry. There are tech companies that are on board with President Trump, even though you won't hear it in Silicon Valley because of the intellectual property theft. But give me your thoughts below. What do you think? This is something I think Steve Bannon puts too much emphasis on. I don't think the average American voter really cares that much about this. I think, though, if you look at what's been happening, it's actually a very good thing what Trump is doing. He's addressing this now. I think that Bannon puts way too much emphasis on this as the biggest issue. It might be one of the biggest issues of our time, but it's not the biggest issue that most Americans care about. I think generally most Americans care about a good foreign policy, which is what President Trump has. He has a non-interventionist foreign policy. That's why he'll win again. If Trump engaged in a foreign policy nightmare or blunder or catastrophe, he would lose. It's pretty simple. He couldn't get away with destroying a country like Libya, like Obama did. Establishment Democrats and establishment Republicans can get away with foreign policy nightmares because the media loves militancy, and they love militancy from the perspective of, we're doing this under official U.S. national security, and we're trying our best, and oh my goodness, there's that chaos and mayhem that we've created. Oh my God, that's so bad. But it's like they love the fantasy of it. I don't know what it is. It sells airtime. The media has no problem with an establishment Democrat like President Obama destroying a country or paying, giving money to insurgents, which is hilarious. Why Mr. Piker would go on and on about that. He pushed for whatever. Check out my H.A. Goodman's other channel below. But if President Trump does not get into a foreign policy nightmare, he's the first president to step foot in North Korea. And if the economy still continues to expand, and even if the growth rate slows down, it's still better. There's still more jobs created in 2 years than the first 2 years of President Obama's administration, or even at any 2-year span of Obama's administration. And if he can fix this trade imbalance with China, and if he can actually ensure that if he could negotiate a deal where the Chinese government doesn't have incentive to break the deal because they know that there will be retaliation that they don't want from an economic perspective, that's a good thing. And that'll actually help the U.S. Keep pace with the growth of China. That's also an issue, too. Eventually, China's going to surpass us economically. Eventually. Far surpass us, very likely. But you want to be able to keep pace as much as possible. Okay, give me your thoughts below. Check out H.A. Goodman's other channel. If you want to support my voice long term, my Patreon is below. And give me your thoughts. The good thing about Trump is that he addresses issues, and he does so in a way that no establishment leader would do. He does his thing. He does his own thing, and the media and Democrats, they try to make him as this unhinged madman who is... Nobody cares about Twitter. Dan Rather has I'm going to do a segment on Dan Rather. This was a guy who was completely submarined by his own industry. under the Bush administration. But I mean, this is Dan Rather, August 23rd, 2019. I yearn for a world, and then I'll do a more unfiltered segment. But I yearn for, on H.A. Goodman's other channel, but I yearn for a world, or even a Friday evening, where a friend or family member asking, quote, "Did you hear?" doesn't immediately produce a pit in the stomach and the mental image of Donald Trump rage-tweeting chaos and incoherence. I mean, my God. You mean that him being the first president to step foot in North Korea, or 4.2 million jobs created under this administration, or the fact that he's addressing the trade deficit with China, or the fact that there's far more manufacturing growth under Trump than under Obama? You mean all of these good things they don't overshadow the fact that Libya was destroyed because of policy decisions that Biden and Clinton and President Obama made? You mean to tell me that this is what the pit in the stomach and mental produce a pit in the stomach? Oh, I get stand Trump. It's too much for me. I mean, this is the type of thing that people love. This is why people vote for Trump. Because I used to really like and respect Dan Rather. I still do. But it's like he is trying so hard, or maybe he's just part of that world. The establishment journalist, the media, Hollywood, Democrats, they have to look at Trump as this abnormal Martian monster, this orange nightmare. And they can't look at the reality of his administration. The reality of his administration is a lot better than the reality of President Obama's administration in every way, shape, or form. But they can't look at it. They can't look at it for what it is. They have to create this pit in the stomach and mental image. I just can't stand his tweeting. And that's another reason why he'll win. In addition to the fact it'll be Clinton 4.7.0, who knows? But it'll be Clinton versus Trump again. Give me your thoughts below. Thank you so very, very much. Check out H.A. Goodman's other channel right this second.